Welcome back to my mental health and crime channel. My name is Huda London. This is the case of the Idaho quadruple murders. May the 4 victims rest in peace. Brian Kohlberger is charged with 4 counts of murder and 1 count of burglary. Brian Kohlberger and his defense attorney, Ann Taylor, want the charges to be thrown away.
Do you understand the charge in count 1 burglary?
Yes.
A hearing in Brian Kohlberger's case this week is shrouded in secrecy as his legal team asks the judge to throw out the indictment, charging him with the murders of 4 University of Idaho students.
I would say this is more than, a really big hill for them to climb. This is like Mount Everest they're trying to climb here.
Thanks for joining us here on Law and Crime. I'm Anjanette Levy. Brian Kohlberger's lawyers have filed 2 motions asking Judge John Judge to either dismiss the indictment against him or to send the case back to a lower court for a preliminary hearing. In a preliminary hearing, a prosecutor calls witnesses, think detectives or crime lab analysts or even eyewitnesses, to show a judge there's probable cause that a defendant committed a crime. Defense attorneys like preliminary hearings because they get to cross-examine witnesses before trial. And sometimes they learn information that can help the defense. That didn't happen in this case. Instead, the Latah County prosecutor chose to present the case to a grand jury, which is done behind closed doors without Kohlberger or his lawyer present.
I knew from the get-go that this was almost assuredly going to be a case that was brought before the grand jury.
Edwina Elcox is a criminal defense attorney in Idaho who's following Kohlberger's case. She explained why it wasn't surprising that a grand jury was impaneled.
You have a large amount of media speculation and public speculation about the case. You have the victims' families, and also the other roommates that were there and other potential witnesses in the case. And so I think to protect the integrity of the proceeding, the grand jury was almost assuredly the route the prosecution was going to take. Now, absolutely, do I understand why the defense would have preferred a preliminary hearing route, right? You get the first shot at the state's witnesses and the evidence, and the state doesn't get to solely control that narrative. But I do not think that it is surprising at all that the prosecution elected to utilize the grand jury.
Kohlberger claims the grand jury was biased and that the grand jury heard inadmissible evidence. Kohlberger also claims the indictment should be dismissed or he should get a preliminary hearing because of prosecutorial misconduct.
I think if there's any area where there would be a solid or a theoretical solid challenge, it would be the impaneling of the grand jury, right? We have a very, very small community, a small county. And so obviously when you have a case of this magnitude with not only national attention, international attention, it would be very, very hard to seat a jury locally that had no preconceived notions or frankly hadn't heard about the case at all.
Kohlberger did not enter a plea at his arraignment in May.
Your rule stands aside.
Because Mr. Kohlberger is standing silent, I'm going to enter not guilty pleas on each charge.
Kohlberger's attorney Ann Taylor said he stood silent to preserve his right to challenge the indictment. But the information the defense is using to support their claims is sealed. A hearing on that motion is closed to the public this Thursday, an incredibly rare occurrence in a criminal case. So what could possibly happen at that hearing?
I would imagine that there is going to be evidence presented, whether that is through documentary evidence, witnesses, and live testimony, right? But when you have a motion of this nature, it's not something that the defense can just theorize about, right? To make this argument and to ask the court to make the ruling to ultimately dismiss the indictment in this case, it can't be theoreticals and it can't be hypotheticals. I would imagine that the defense has to have some real concrete evidence to show this is what happened, Judge, or these series of things are what happened. And this is why this indictment cannot stand. I mean, this in my mind is not a case this motion is not a situation where it can just be legal theory and argument. You're going to have to present to the judge some absolute concrete evidence, testimony, and otherwise to convince the judge there is something that occurred that warrants the dismissal that the defense is seeking in this case.
Police have cited circumstantial evidence, such as touch DNA and cell phone records, in making the case that Kohberger murdered students Kaylee Gonsalves, Maddie Mogan, Ethan Chapin, and Xander Kernodle nearly 1 year ago. Kohberger's second motion to dismiss the indictment claims prosecutors did not present enough evidence to grand jurors. They cite the Idaho Constitution that says the grand jury ought to find an indictment when all the evidence before them, taken together, if unexplained or uncontradicted, would, in their judgment, warrant a conviction by a trial jury. That's different from the probable cause standard currently used. Idaho attorney Tara Malik on that argument.
What the defense has been arguing here is that the same standard that's used at trial to convict someone, so beyond a reasonable doubt, should be used at the grand jury stage as well. Both in a preliminary hearing route, had the state gone that way, or in the grand jury proceeding, the standard has been, under modern jurisprudence, this probable cause, more likely than not, 51% standard, that a crime was committed and this individual is the one that committed the crime. And so for the defense to come in and argue now that we should throw all of that out, all of these courts who've interpreted this statute as it comes to the standard of proof are wrong, and we need to go back to, or we need to go to this high beyond a reasonable doubt burden is not a novel argument, but one that has been pretty soundly rejected by the courts.
Is this a case of the defense literally doing everything they can to challenge this case? Because, I mean, maybe the legislature needs to go back, or the voters of the state need to go back and amend this part of the Idaho Constitution, but it just seems to me this is not going to be an argument that flies, although I give them points for creativity.
Yeah, I mean, I think the defense is in a really tough spot with this case. What we know so far, and admittedly we haven't seen everything, we're not privy to the discovery that's gone back and forth between the state and the defense team here, but what we've seen and what we know so far presents a pretty compelling picture and a pretty compelling theory of the case that the state has here against Bryan Kohberger. And so I'm sure that the defense is looking at every route and really holding the state to its standard of proof, as well as making sure that the state has followed all the rules that it needs to follow. But I would say this is more than, a really big hill for them to climb. This is like Mount Everest they're trying to climb here with this legal argument.
Bryan Kohberger remains in the Latah County Jail, where he's held without bail. Law and Crime will...
I believe that Bryan Christopher Kohberger should be given a fair chance. Besides the grand jury, there are so many evidence here that have not been presented. Everything seems to be on a gag order. But I believe this is one of the things that the defense attorney could actually use.
Crime 2 is digging deeper into court documents that outline new movement in the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. In our effort to bring you more to every story, Crime 2's Shannon Mowdy spoke with a defense attorney about new filings that reference Brady Giglio material.
New filings in the Moscow murder case show prosecutors have found and are now sharing with the defense possible Brady Giglio material. Now, while much of the information is sealed, we do know it has something to do with a, quote, confidential internal affairs investigation of one of the officers in the case.
And it could be huge for the defense. or it could be totally meaningless. So since we don't know what it is.
Defense attorney John Henry Brown says Brady Giglio means law enforcement and prosecutors have to turn over any evidence or information that may help the defense.
Actually, under Giglio and Brady, prosecutors have an obligation to look for such evidence.
Sometimes that's evidence which exonerates the accused. But with mention of an internal affairs investigation, it sounds like this case is about a potential challenge to the credibility of a police officer.
Most police departments have created what's called a Brady list. And on the Brady list are officers, detectives, internal personnel who have committed some sort of an error in the past. And that the defense should be told about it.
Brown cautions Brady Giglio disclosures like this are pretty common because not handing over the information can get cases overturned. And the Brady Giglio material referenced here may have nothing to do with the Moscow murder case itself.
It could be something as small as a DUI 25 years ago. Or it could be something more serious. Obviously, the most serious thing for the prosecution, the state, would be if the officer, detective, or whatever, has some history of not telling the truth.
Crime 2 News reached out to law enforcement in Idaho, Washington, and also in Pennsylvania, where the suspect was arrested, to try to find out which agency is involved. We've also submitted public records requests for more information. Shannon Mowdy.
Affairs investigation is now underway for an officer involved in the case of accused murderer Bryan Kohberger. And according to experts, that could mean good news for Kohberger's defense. Kohberger was arrested late last year for the murders of 4 University of Idaho students who were stabbed to death in their off-campus home. He's now being held in the Latah County Jail in Idaho, awaiting his preliminary hearing. In newly released court documents filed on Monday, Idaho prosecutors have, quote, become aware of potential Brady Giglio material related to one of the officers involved in the above referenced case. The material, in the form of confidential internal affairs investigation, is hereby submitted in camera to the court. What all that means is prosecutors are required by law to turn any information over to the defense that could exonerate the defendant, help their case, or impeach the credibility of a witness. As Law and Crime Network host Jesse Weber explained on Dan Abrams Live, this could mean several things. An officer involved in the investigation could have lied or withheld evidence, meaning it could get thrown out. On a lesser scale, the officer may have had a pattern of misconduct in the past, but prosecutors have to disclose that information to the defense ahead of an eventual cross-examination. Right now, the case is under seal, so we don't have exact details about what happened. The prosecution has also asked the judge to issue a protective order on that information, which would then block the defense from releasing the information publicly.
It alleges that the defendant, Bryan C. Kohberger, on or about November 13th of 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, did unlawfully enter a residence located at 1122 King Road, Moscow, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder.
Meanwhile, some reports say Kohberger is closely following his case from behind bars, watching himself on TV. But Law and Crime Network host and public defender Brian Buckmeyer says that's not unusual.
I think it's very normal for someone to follow their case if it's highly publicized. They want to see what everyone's talking about, what they're saying about their personal life as well as about the case. It's like checking Instagram or your Facebook to see what people are tagging you in or saying about you.
Other reports say Kohberger is being held in maximum security away from all other Latah County Jail inmates. According to News Nation, Kohberger has lost a significant amount of weight while behind bars, though he does have access to a TV and 1 hour of outside time per day. Some reports also say Kohberger has private prayer services with a religious leader.
It is unsurprising for someone to find religion while in prison or in jail. Just like I would say it's unsurprising for someone to find religion when they're diagnosed with cancer or with a severe disease. It's, I think, the person seeing their own mortality and the difficulty of their situation. Surprising for someone to find religion while in prison or in jail. Just like I would say it's unsurprising for someone to find religion when they're diagnosed with cancer or with a severe disease. It's, I think, the person seeing their own mortality and the difficulty of their situation and looking for an answer.
News Nation also reports Kohberger's two sisters, Amanda and Melissa, were both fired from their jobs after his arrest. The network reports Melissa worked as a mental health therapist and Amanda was a working actress. None of the family have visited Kohberger in Idaho since his arrest, but News Nation also reports they speak via phone. Kohberger is due back in court on June 26 for a preliminary hearing that's expected to last multiple days. According to Idaho law, after that hearing, Kohberger will then enter a plea in the murders.
I do understand that this case is in gag orders. In fact, almost everything is on a gag order. But there is a Brady Giglio material. It could be a police officer, a police detective, somebody involved in this case or another case. That means it could be basically that a police officer hasn't been truthful, he has a record of lying. So I do not understand why the Brady Giglio material is on disclosure and it's on request for protective order. All these things I believe is important because we want justice for the victims, but Brian Christopher Kohberger is entitled to get a fair trial, especially after we see everything that's happening in the grub truck, in the Banfield body cam video, Saeed's phone, the things he's watching, Joe DeVito's phone, what he is watching, Joe Vito. Then we have the 5 figures or 4 figures running. There's so much things in this case that points out that Kohberger could be involved with other people or that Kohberger is completely innocent. We don't know of that, and I believe the prosecution is putting everything in gag order and they run everything behind the scenes because they do not have enough evidence. Or I believe, this is my personal belief only, this is for entertainment purpose, I wonder if the genealogical DNA was taken in the correct and legal manner, because they're entitled to get a roadmap of how the genealogical DNA pointed out to Kohberger. The defense is entitled to find out the 3 unidentified male DNAs. And now we have a Brady Giglio material in this case. In fact, it's more serious than that, I believe, because it's on internal affairs. So one of the officers has been investigated by internal affairs or is still under investigation. For the prosecution to have come out with it, they don't want to lose this case, and they really look like they want to nail it on Brian Christopher Kohberger, but there should be more information coming out. It's just a bit surprising that it's almost a year and the prosecution is not coming out with the material they have. Everyone is entitled to a fair trial. These four precious victims who died in such a horrific manner, may they rest in peace, Kaylee Congavs, Madison Morgan, Eaton Chapin, and Zana Knodel. May they rest in peace, may justice be served for them, and may the correct justice be served for them, and may the correct justice be served for Brian Christopher Kohberger, because I am starting to be baffled with all this that's happening. We've been waiting for today's update, and today's update just says that they're proceeding with the grand jury. Why is everything on a gag order? If the prosecution has their line of work in order, why don't they present their case? Why don't they give Brian Kohberger and Ann Taylor and the defense team a chance to see how they got to Brian Kohberger. Please like, share, and subscribe. Justice for the victims. It's always about the victims. May they rest in peace. And have a good day.